All right, so we had the article Evangelium vitae, which was Pope John Paul II's expression on the position of the Catholic Church regarding the value and inviolability of the human life. So there's two parts. There's an intro, and then there's a chapter 3 portion. As far as the intro, it was broken into 4 sections. The first section talked about the unity of Christ. The article started off talking about how Christmas reveals the full meaning of every human birth. The church receives love from its parishioners and preaches to be faithful to people of every age and of all cultures. And the second portion kind of talks about the incomparable worth of the human person. So life is created to be shared with God, which puts an inestimable value on the human life. So human worth can come from, as far as Pope John Paul says, a relationship with God. And then kind of reflecting back on Michael Tooley, he talks about the human capability, self-consciousness, and reason. Life is a sacred reality entrusted to us to be preserved with the sense of responsibility and brought to perfection in love and in the gift of ourselves to God, to our brothers and sisters. Every person should come to recognize that the sacred value of the human life is present from its very beginning to its very end. So kind of when they say to the very beginning to the very end, this comes from the second of conception up until the person naturally dies. So believers of Christ should defend and promote the right of human life. The Son of God is present in every human being. And then the next portion of the introduction talks about new threats to human life. Every life is entrusted to the maternal care of the church when a threat to human dignity arises. So there have been an extraordinary increase of threats to the lives of individuals, especially when life is weak and defenseless, which is a dishonor to our Creator, God, obviously. And then the Second Vatican Council talks about 3 different points regarding death or disgraceful things to the human life. So the first one is opposition of life, which is murder, genocide, abortion, euthanasia, or willful destruction of a human life. The second portion talks about insulting human dignity, such as subhuman living conditions, arbitrary imprisonment, slavery, prostitution, and the selling of women and children. The third one talks about the disgraceful working conditions, such as people being treated as instruments of gain rather than as free and responsible persons. So all of those 3 kind of discuss how the human life can be violated and not respected. So due to scientific and technological advancements, the basic values of human life are being violated more frequently. The destruction of many lives before birth and in the final stages is not moral and violates the rights of the individual freedom. So here when they talk about the destruction of lives before birth, they're talking about abortion before the child is born and how the right of the individual life should be honored until its very natural end. So here it's kind of talking about how euthanasia is not acceptable by any means. And then medical professionals in some countries are willing to perform life-preventing procedures for free assistance from the healthcare systems. So this was kind of an interesting point that was brought up because these medical professionals are being kind of funded by the individuals around them, even though all the individuals do not agree with these, procedures such as euthanasia and abortion. And so then the next point is in communion with all the bishops of the world. So the extraordinary consistory of cardinals was devoted to the problem of threats to human life. The church feels that it is their duty to speak out on behalf of those who have no voice to ensure that human rights are not violated, defenseless and unborn beings. So I thought this was kind of interesting because it kind of flashes back to the idea of a vegetative state, how even though some human beings might not be able to have their own voice, the church will back them up and make sure that their life is respected and not ended early. And so also by ensuring justice and solidarity, a new culture of humankind will be affirmed and a civilization will be born based on truth and love. So I thought it was interesting that basically by following these actions to ensure that human life is respected, if everyone were to carry out these actions, then a civilization based on truth and love will come about.
So, the second part of the encyclical that we had to analyze was chapter 3, titled "You Shall Not Kill, God's Holy Law." The overarching theme of this chapter was just that, is that, abortion is killing, and how it relates to the teachings and, general everyday life of Catholics. It starts off by defining abortion. The Second Vatican Council defined abortion together with infanticide as an unspeakable crime, specifically as a procedure that directly and deliberately kills by whatever means an unborn child, which they consider is absolute murder. Similarly, if the baby is to be born into poor conditions, whether it be convenience to the mother's health or the decent standard of living that the mother would be in at the time, it doesn't justify the killing of an innocent human being. But the Pope also identifies that it's not solely the mother's fault whether they choose to abort a child or not. He also cites the father who, through pressure to have an abortion or leaving the mother alone to make the decision alone, would assist in convincing someone to have an abortion. He also blames medical professionals for providing the death service, whereas they should be promoting life. Also mentions legislators for promoting and approving abortions at health care services, and abortion institutions and foundations for campaigning for the legalization. Continues to talk about when exactly they become a human, and they define it as basically when conception happens. From that time, the ovum is fertilized, life is begun with, which is neither that of the father nor the mother, is rather the life of a new human. And at conception, the ovum must be guaranteed the unconditional respect of a human that is morally due. And with that evidence, the question arises in the encyclical is, how could this evidence of being a human not lead to being granted the rights of personhood? Then continues into the traditional teachings of Catholicism and how they stand on abortion, kind of from a more sacred scripture point of view, is that the Bible doesn't necessarily address abortion, much like it doesn't address specifically issues that we face today. But it does teach that the sacredness of human life, how it is a possession of God, and killing a possession of God would be an immoral act. Similarly, citing the declaration by the Congregation of Doctrine and Faith, is always anonymously decided that abortion and infanticide is a grave moral disorder and is also described as anticipated murder. So keeping with the theme of not killing because it's bad. Furthermore, this interpretation of whether abortion is legal or not has been pretty much the same since 1938 from Pius XII, who declared originally that no law may legalize abortion or oppose the law of God. And every pope since then has mainly agreed with him. And then the chapter ends by analyzing other forms of killing that would exist in a medical state, such as mainly embryonic killing or embryonic treatments, which they cite that the embryo must not be used for healing purposes due to its disrespect for life and the integrity of the embryo, which we've talked about in this course before. And this also applies to in vitro fertilization, which discredits the embryo. Again, another theme that we've learned in this course. Further, it goes into prenatal diagnostics that would lead somebody to have an abortion, like if they were to find out that their child was going to be born with, no legs, or if it were to have Down syndrome, is that having an abortion due to knowing that they weren't within the parameters of normality would be a shameful act. And that also extends into euthanasia, which is, again, medical professionals ending life. That is, again, another immoral act. And, yeah,
That's all I got.
that's all we got.
Thanks for watching.